Gentleman yield chair recognizes Mr. Casar.
Thank you, Chairman. And to the point that my distinguished colleague from Tennessee just made, the most immigrant states by far in the country with most immigrants, documented and undocumented, are California and Texas. Virtually no other state comes close, California being, of course, under unified Democratic control, Texas statewide under unified Republican control. The next state that comes somewhat close, but not really, is Florida, of course, also under unified Republican control. The question of whether to count immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, was decided by the United States Congress back right after the Civil War. So this was decided, it was debated in these same halls, and that Congress and the states decided to end the 3/5 compromise, which is when enslaved people were counted as 3/5 of a person when we did counting of people. Now that seems like the worst way to do it. And so they said, let's count every person as one person. And the Congress decided to do that. Not just with all due respect, just to my colleague who spoke before me, but to everyone in the Congress. I still don't get why we would rehash and rehab that debate after the Civil War. I think after that amount of bloodshed, that amount of terror and horror, we would look back at the congressional record and say, yeah, it probably makes sense that we say we're going to stop counting half people and 3/5 people and say we're going to count the number of people in the country, whether they vote or don't vote, whether they're citizens or not citizens, whether they're kids or seniors. We're just going to count every person as one person. I couldn't disagree more with this really kind of wild Republican idea of the so-called, quote unquote, Equal Representation Act, which would only count certain people in this country in complete violation of the 14th Amendment, again, a post-Civil War amendment. I don't know anybody here that wants to go back to sort of pre-Civil War times or a pre-Civil War Constitution. My office, just like every office here, when somebody calls, you don't ask, hey, are you a citizen? You ask, are you a constituent? How can I help you? We need every single person counted. And in fact, if there is a citizenship question on the census, we then would be admitting that we want to undercount people because all the data points to the idea that this undercounts people. And the point of the census is to follow the Constitution and count the number of people. It's not to figure out who's a citizen or a non-citizen. It's to find out by the Constitution how many people live in each state. And Mr. Santos, isn't it correct that the census plays a role in counting the number of people for electoral purposes, but then also counts the number of people to determine how many federal dollars go into a state?
That is correct.
And so if a state has a falsely low census count, that could result in those states getting fewer federal resources for things like food for the hungry, hospitals, education.
Correct.
And so a state like Texas, having had an undercount, could result in fewer dollars coming to my state for people that pay their taxes and might need those dollars.
Correct.
And so if we ask a citizenship question, when the Constitution says that we need to count the number of people, not the number of citizens, then it could result in my state that was already undercounted getting further undercounted and could result in places like Texas getting fewer federal resources.
Correct.
What I don't get is in the federal government's nearly $1 trillion in assistance. So all of the people that work in this country, they send their hard-earned tax dollars here. Then we send back about $1 trillion back to the states. I don't understand why my Republican colleagues would want states like Texas to get less help because of adding an unnecessary question. What I think I hear is some sort of conspiracy theory that Democrats want there to be more immigrants so that we can have better shots in elections, which is just nuts. And frankly, the people who have immigrated to this country and then decide to become citizens and are given a chance to become citizens, they actually listen to their leaders, just like any other voter, and they decide how to vote. There are plenty of people in my district that vote for me or vote against me who were born in this country and who weren't born in this country. And I think that at the end of the day, it's so important for the American people to understand and hear that this idea of a citizenship question would undercount people, would result in fewer federal resources coming to places like Texas. So Texans on the Republican side that are for this bill are just basically saying, send your taxpayer dollars elsewhere. And third, it would take us back to a pre-Civil War reality, and that's just a shameful thing for the Republicans. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.